As a kid, I lived in a small town in southern Ohio, which was a big railroad city. Trains ran through the city all day long and even into the night. The main artery through town was cut in two by railroad tracks. In fact, they stood between me and my high school, making me late more than once. But what made it worse was that I lived on the north side of town and my job was on the south side. Because I didn't have a car, I was forced to walk to work. The only sure way for me to make it to work on time when a train cut through town was to take the underpass. But I hated taking the underpass at night. Homeless people and derelicts hung out in the tunnel and on the bridge above. Plus, at night, the place was just plain creepy. There are tons of rumors and local lore about bad things and evil spirits inhabiting the underpass. I try not to believe the stuff about ghosts and other supernatural beings, and that was a challenge. The place just had a bad vibe. One night, I was forced to take the underpass because there was a train crossing above. When you're in the underpass, the cars passing under the tracks sounds like something from another world. As I descended the walkway, I had a sinking feeling in my gut. It was like descending into hell. Even though the tunnel was relatively short, it felt as if it were a half-mile long that night. The cars passing by groaned like spirits as they rushed by just off to my right. Something about the experience made me feel unsteady on my feet. The tunnel was covered in graffiti. There was a dank smell that filled my nostrils, permeating my body with a tremor of fear. I made it a short way into the tunnel when I saw someone coming from the other side. Car lights from behind the person blurred my view of them, but there was something not right about this person. I froze in place and my fear went to a level 10. I know I should have backed out, but if it was just another person like me, I would feel stupid. The figure just kept coming toward me. The cars kept rushing through the underpass, zooming along. I stopped in place and my head felt dizzy. All the stories about ghosts in the tunnel came flooding in, and I knew I was in trouble, but I was paralyzed in fear. The figure came right at me, and I felt close to fainting. Then they passed through me, and my body felt super chilled and my knees felt weak. It took me several seconds to recover, but when I turned around, I saw the figure making its way up the walkway from the direction I had come from. My body slowly got back to normal, and I stumbled off in the other direction. I made it out of the tunnel. It took me 20 minutes to get to my job, which still made me late. After that night, I decided to take any way to work but through that underpass, even if it took me a mile out of my way. On the east side of my city is a neighborhood of over 300 homes. All of them are abandoned. Little has been spoken about it around town. In some ways, it seems like a total mystery. Neither the TV news or the newspaper has said anything about it. It's like it's a secret, maybe a dark secret. My brother and I decided we needed to check it out, so we traveled across the city to explore this abandoned neighborhood. A chain link fence surrounded the entire area, complete with a padlock. We found a way to slip through the gate and we started walking around. As soon as we got inside the neighborhood, I felt this eerie presence in the air, like eyes were watching me as we walked down the street. Doors were missing from almost all the houses. Windows had been broken out. The insides of the houses were filled with the debris of past lives. Most of the houses had been damaged, presumably done by what I can only assume were scrappers, looking for anything of value. Each house I entered had a heavy presence in it, as if I could hear the former residents living their lives there. Conversations seemed to float in the air. In some places, It was like the scent of past meals drifted around the place. All the time we were there, I kept asking questions. What happened here? Where are the people that lived here? Where did they all go? One of the most haunting images was a child's toy sitting among the rubble of a family room. It was like the people had to leave the house quickly, as if something had driven them out. More than once as we walked down the street, I felt eyes watching me from the houses. Whenever I looked in the windows, I could swear shadows drifted out of view, like the remembrance of the people who used to live there, haunting the neighborhood. There's a surreal quality to being in a place like this, where children should be playing and people should be living out their lives. The place was deathly quiet, and it was an oppressively heavy silence, as if it were imposed on the whole neighborhood. When I entered one house, I discovered the artifacts of the people who used to live there. I felt the essence of a person who had lived in these rooms, as if they were still there. Spray-painted words covered the entryways of many of the houses. The words were cryptic, making me wonder what they really meant. Could they be a code? A symbol to warn people away? In one house, a chill fell onto my body as if someone had lowered the temperature about 20 degrees. I felt goosebumps right up my arms and a shiver went down my spine. The most unsettling moment came when I entered a house and I went to the top of the basement stairs. As I stood there, I got this sense that something was down there, and that something knew I was in the house. My mind told me that going down there was a bad idea. Who knew if there couldn't be drug addicts or squatters down there? My heart said it wasn't all that. It said that there was something down there, not a someone, a dark presence, something that wanted me to go down those stairs, to come down into the basement, to stay there and never, ever leave. My head got light and I felt myself teeter at the top of the stairs. Then I heard my brother's voice calling me to come to the next house. But in all honesty, I'd seen enough. Every fiber of my being told me to get out of that house and out of that neighborhood. It was time to leave. Past time. My brother was very reluctant to go because he wanted to do more exploring. But he must have seen something in my face. We left the neighborhood and deep down, I hoped the place was torn down, and that happened very soon. Whatever was still residing there needed to be buried. I know it's a cliche to say that cemeteries are spooky places, but the cemetery in my neighborhood wasn't that way at all. It's where I took my morning walks and the place where I taught my kids to drive because I knew they couldn't hurt anyone in there. It was as harmless as any place. That was until it wasn't. My first bad experience with the place happened one early evening when I decided to switch things up and moved my evening walk into the cemetery. As soon as I stepped inside the place, I got a weird sensation, like someone was watching me. When I stopped to look around, I didn't see anything, but this strange feeling hung over me. You know the phrase, it feels like someone just walked over your grave. Well, that's how I felt. Goosebumps popped up all over my body. I'm not the superstitious type, but this was one time where I decided to listen and turned around and walked out of the cemetery. But I'm the stubborn type. So the next day, I decided that I'd just become overly superstitious the night before. When I got up the next morning, I decided to face my fears head on and return to my morning routine of walking in the cemetery. It was a crisp morning with a mist clinging over the streets. Usually I found this sort of morning refreshing, but inside I felt an existential dread seeping into my bones. Still, I wasn't going to let it stop me from taking my morning walk. As soon as I entered the cemetery, I desperately wish I'd stuck to the neighborhood streets, but I just knew I had to face down my fears and push further into the place. If nothing else, I felt that nothing could hurt me in the daylight. At least that's what I thought. That did not turn out to be true, though. Despite fear filling my body, something else, something otherworldly, kept drawing me deeper into the cemetery. It was as if I'd lost control over my own will. I passed by each tombstone, and the names of each person on them seemed to echo in the morning air.
Lineberger, Stevens, Woods.
There was this noise playing inside my head like a long musical note being stretched out to the extreme limits. It reminded me of what sailors called a siren song, and it had an irresistible tug that I could not deny. It drew me deeper into the cemetery, and it became apparent to me that it was pulling me toward the mausoleum at the back section of the grounds. This strange, haunting musical tone seemed to be emanating from inside the granite building, as if it were inviting me to come inside and never leave. As I stood outside the mausoleum, I felt as if I were living outside my own body, as if my tenuous tether with reality was getting thinner and thinner with each passing second, about to let me go and drift off. Some voice of alarm deep down inside me warned me not to go inside, as if it knew if I did enter the building, I would never leave. It was as if gravity itself were pulling me closer to the door, though, and I felt its irresistible pull. But images of my family, my wife, my kids, my brothers and my sisters flashed in my head, and I knew I did not want to disappoint them. So I reached down deep to find some reserves I needed to break free of the spell that this malevolent place was casting over me. Suddenly I snapped out of it, and I got out of the cemetery as fast as I could. I never told any of my family about that morning because I was sure they would think I was losing my mind. What I could tell you is that I steered clear of the cemetery on all my walks after that.